In the heart of Oregon, where the Willamette Valley meets the rugged Coast Range, lies the city of Corvallis. A century ago, this quiet town was the stage for a grand, if somewhat quixotic, railway scheme, orchestrated by a flamboyant figure named Thomas Egenton Hogg. He was a man of boundless ambition and questionable ethics. He envisioned Corvallis as the hub of a transcontinental railroad. He dreamed of trains snaking through the mountains, carrying goods and passengers to the Pacific coast. His railroad was to be the linchpin of this ambitious project. Hogg was born in Cecil County, Maryland, in 1828. By 1861, Hogg had moved to Louisiana. That year, the state seceded from the United States of America and joined the Confederacy. On November 16, 1863, Hogg and 5 other Confederate sympathizers boarded the Joseph L. Garrity, a Union schooner loaded with cotton, in Matamoros, Mexico. On November 26, they seized the ship without harming the crew and then abandoned them on the Yucatan Peninsula. The pirate crew proceeded to Belize, where they sold the ship's cargo. By this time, the ship's real crew had alerted British authorities. Hogg and 1 other man escaped into Nicaragua and across the Isthmus of Panama, but British authorities captured 3 others, charging them with piracy. Word of Hogg's success in capturing the ship and eluding capture reached Confederate Navy Secretary Stephen Mallory. In May 1864, Mallory instructed Hogg to seize a Union steamship. On November 10, 1864, Hogg's party boarded the Union steamship Salvador in Panama City, but Union officials had received word of the plot and a party from the USS Lancaster arrested Hogg and his men. Hogg was sentenced by a military commission to be hanged for violating the rules of war, but his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment by Union General Irvin McDowell. Hogg began serving his sentence at Alcatraz in 1864 and was transferred to San Quentin in August 1865. On May 7, 1866, he was released from prison on the orders of President Andrew Johnson. After the Civil War, Hogg became a businessman and railroad promoter in Oregon. Hogg arrived in Corvallis in 1871 with the vision to build a new transcontinental railroad that would connect the Pacific coast to the heartland of America. Linking Yaquina Bay on the Oregon coast with Boise, Idaho, Hogg's railroad promised to cut 225 miles off the trip from San Francisco to the inland northwest by slicing through the Cascade Mountains. In October 1872, Hogg incorporated the Corvallis and Yaquina Bay Railroad. The company made little headway in raising capital and building until Hogg teamed with Corvallis banker Wallace Nash. Wallace Nash was born in London in 1837, and by 1871 he was a successful solicitor and attorney living just outside London. In 1877, at the age of 40, he decided to see some of the world, and by the Panama Isthmus route, he made his way to Oregon for a visit. Back in England, he wrote a book about his travels primarily aimed at people who wished to emigrate. In 1879, he followed his own advice and with his wife and children, plus a few like-minded people, migrated to Oregon. In 1880, Hogg and Nash incorporated the Oregon Pacific Railroad and began promoting the idea of Corvallis as the hub of a transcontinental railroad that would establish Newport as this San Francisco of the North to East Coast financiers. Hogg and Nash raised $15 million, which is equivalent to around $500 million in today's dollars. Hogg started building the railroad from Corvallis to Yaquina Bay, following the route of the existing Corvallis and Yaquina Bay wagon road. Hogg originally intended to terminate the line at Seal Rock on the Oregon coast. In anticipation of the railroad's arrival, the town was platted in 1877 with pedestrian-friendly public spaces and resort hotels that would accommodate train travelers, but the line was instead routed through Toledo to end at Yaquina, resulting in financial ruin for many who invested in Seal Rock. In 1885, the line was completed from Yaquina to Corvallis, and in 1887, the Corvallis train depot was completed. 1887 was an exciting year for Corvallis. The railroad had completed its track from Yaquina Bay on the Pacific coast to Corvallis. The railroad had grand plans to continue across eastern Oregon to meet the Union Pacific, forming the final link in the northern transcontinental rail route. Hogg envisioned that Yaquina Bay would become the San Francisco of the North, and that Corvallis and Albany would beat Portland to become Oregon's railroad center. Corvallis citizens were caught up in the excitement. Local investment was strong. The prosperity of the 1880s and the advent of the railroad encouraged the citizens to build their new courthouse in 1888 and an impressive new state agricultural college, now called Oregon State University, Administration Building in 1889, to prove to the skeptical that Corvallis was the center of justice, culture, and learning. But as the construction of the railroad progressed, so too did the financial woes. Hogg, a master of hype and self-promotion, had overextended himself. Bonds were sold, promises were made, and hopes were raised, only to be dashed. Hogg's ambitious plans were plagued by financial difficulties and engineering challenges. The project quickly spiraled out of control. Just about everything imaginable happened. Train wrecks, shipwrecks, management squabbles, cost overruns, ruthless completion, skullduggery, and bad weather. Established shippers who used Portland opposed the new route and bought up land adjacent to the land grants to make routing difficult. Other problems included the fact that the Yaquina Bay harbor was too shallow for large ships, which was not an issue for the Columbia River. Moreover, building the railroad over the mountains proved to be expensive and plagued by the mismanagement of funds. There were also problems with the steamship named Yaquina City that Hogg had purchased to provide a direct link to his railroad between Yaquina and San Francisco. Yaquina City successfully completed several voyages until she ran aground at Yaquina Bay in 1887 due to a rudder failure. Despite the Yaquina City being insured, Hogg had just lost his biggest source of income and could not immediately replace the steamer. To the east, the line had been extended as far as Idana, 15 miles short of Santiam Pass before running out of money. Hogg's contract with the government stated, however, that if he could establish railroad service over the Cascade Mountains, he could receive a massive land grant. By selling this land, enough money could be made to keep the railroad in business. To get the grant, some additional track was laid over Santiam Pass. Hogg had mules pull some cars a few times to assert right-of-way. Due to his efforts to build a railroad over the Cascades at that location, Hogg Rock at the top of Santiam Pass is named for him, and Santiam Pass itself was previously named Hogg Pass. In 1888, Hogg purchased the ocean liner Caracas from the Red D Line to replace the Yaquina City. She was renamed Yaquina Bay and towed to Yaquina. Before steamship service could restart, however, Yaquina Bay broke free from the tugboat which was hauling her on December 9, 1888, and ran aground near the wreck of the Yaquina City. Like the Yaquina City, the Yaquina Bay was declared a total loss. The Oregon Pacific Railroad ultimately failed, leaving behind a legacy of unfinished dreams and broken promises. The railroad entered bankruptcy in October 1890. In 1894, it was purchased at a sheriff's auction by lumberman Andrew B. Hammond and renamed the Oregon Central and Eastern Railway, and again in 1897 was reorganized as the Corvallis and Eastern Railroad. In 1907, the CNE was sold to the Southern Pacific. Thomas Egenton Hogg, the once visionary entrepreneur, faded into obscurity. Hogg moved back to Baltimore with his wife Naomi, a native of England who was 35 years his junior, in the late 1880s. They purchased his parents' farm and built a large estate that he named Cecil Manor. The house, one of the most expensive homes in Maryland at the time, was destroyed by fire in 1890. On December 8, 1898, Hogg died of apoplexy on a streetcar in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hogg had retained thousands of acres of land in Oregon granted to him for the railroad, but after his death, the estate became mired in legal entanglements. His attorney was Schuyler C. Spencer. In 1908, Spencer worked to restore 15,000 acres to Hogg's widow Naomi and within 2 years had divorced his wife and remarried Mrs. Hogg. In 1920, in what was attributed to his ill health and financial concerns over a horse farm they owned, Spencer attempted to kill his wife with a revolver. She survived, but Spencer then turned the gun on himself, committing suicide. Today, remnants of Hogg's grand scheme remain. The old Corvallis Depot, a relic of a bygone era, stands as a testament to his ambition and failure. The tracks, once bustling with activity, now lie silent, a reminder of a dream derailed. The Corvallis Depot has been renovated and listed on the National Register of Historic Places as the only two-story combination freight and passenger depot in Oregon. And the upstairs living quarters have been restored to their original use, providing elegant accommodations for Corvallis special guests and any railroad barons who might happen by. As for Yaquina City, it too now lies silent. In 1911, Yaquina City had a railroad station, a roundhouse and associated railroad shops, a bank, a three-story hotel, other commercial establishments, and many homes. As many as 8 trains were needed on weekends to carry beachgoers from the Willamette Valley to Yaquina City and the steamer Yaquina, which carried them across the bay to Newport. However, Newport and nearby Toledo, more accessible by highway, grew larger over time while Yaquina City shrank. By the beginning of World War II, Toledo was the western terminus of the rail line, and the tracks from there to Yaquina City were removed. Roughly 20 years later, the former seaport's population dropped to 0. Today, one can drive along the bay from Newport to Toledo, pass through Yaquina City, and never know that such a town existed. And as for the Eastern Corridor, some of the tracks were submerged by Detroit Lake in the 1950s when the Detroit Dam was completed. In 1999, the line's corridor from Idana to the Cascade Summit was designated as a historic district and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Hogg's project, despite its grand aspirations, was ultimately a victim of its own hubris. While his dream of a transcontinental railroad never materialized, the story of Thomas Egenton Hogg is a tale of hope, failure, and the enduring spirit of the American West. Subscribe and leave a comment saying, "I subscribed," and I'll personally reply to your comment. If you like this Oregon adventure, please give a thumbs up and click on the like button. Thanks so much for watching.